Welcome to the Everyday Citizens Tactical Podcast, episode 41 for the Infantry. My name is Jeremy, and as always, I will be your host. Today I'm joined by an unnamed member of the For the Infantry YouTube channel, a group of active duty Marine Corps infantrymen bringing the skills and considerations of the infantrymen to the masses, both military and civilian alike. Today we sit down to discuss the changes the Marine Corps infantry has made to adapt in recent years, discuss some gear and equipment, and wrap it all up with how it's applicable to the American rifleman.
Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours. Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, everybody, and contestant number 1 of For the Infantry. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
For those that are unfamiliar so far with the YouTube page For the Infantry, it's not just one guy; it's a gaggle of grunts. So you get to not know which one it is tonight that we're talking to.
I like that gaggle of grunts. That's a good way to put it.
Gaggle of grunts. But if you want to, just to kind of let everybody know who you are and give everybody a little background of yourself, go ahead and the floor is yours, man.
Yeah, obviously a patriot of this awesome country. I'm a infantryman, been in for about 6 years. Absolutely love what I do, and just trying to see how much I can contribute to learning new things. So, pretty simple.
And what really kind of gave you guys the inspiration for starting the channel?
I think one of the biggest things was seeing kind of how like the social media trend of looking at like special operations and civilians taking that information and trying to apply it to themselves in a way of like preparedness. Mm-hmm. We saw that, and we thought about the most applicable skills that could be there for civilians, and then also our own infantry community are the actual infantry skills. So taking things from like Marine Corps Rifle Squad, Ranger Handbook, and just making those visuals for those things. That was kind of our mission, because we also saw that in the infantry itself. Like we kind of you see it through kit a lot. Mm-hmm. So guys will like go out on mission, or they'll just be training and just have like a placard with 3 magazines, a belt with like 1 mag. And like you go up and ask them like, hey man, where are like your frag pouches at? And like, oh, I'll just throw them in like my cargo pocket. And I'm like, I don't think that's necessarily the right answer.
Sure.
Because they're emulating, like the soft community. So
yeah, I definitely think that most people, especially from the civilian side, people that were not in at some point, or people that were in that never did like true field stuff, everybody forgets that soft guys have to be good at the basic infantry shit too. Like it's not like they just skipped that whole process. They may not do the basic infantry shit a bunch, but they still had to learn, and most of them probably started in that 03 or 11 Bravo style community and had to learn those basic infantry skills. They didn't just, skip all of that, which a lot of civilians seem to make the mistake of thinking, like, I'm just going to start watching YouTube videos and now I am the soft operator.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's, not like that. But yeah, those Green Berets, the people I actually look up to a lot are like the Ranger Regiment. Those guys, like for simplicity's sake, are special operations infantry. And I think the Marine Corps also takes a lot from the Rangers, like how we built out our squads, the type of gear we buy. You could definitely see a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, I very much like the whole concept behind the Rangers being more than just standard infantrymen, having, a little bit higher standards, a little bit higher purpose when it comes to like the actual mission tasking and all of that, but just the employment of weapon systems that, semi-larger kind of unit thought process. Like they're always thinking about like the platoon size element and whatnot. Just everything around them is just essentially high speed grunt shit before you actually get to like SEALs, Green Berets, Delta, MARSOC, like all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I definitely like the weapon systems they use, like everything from like the Carl Gustav, the PVS 31s. If there's anything the Marine Corps got right in terms of gear, it is the PVS 31s and the clip-on thermal. That thing is awesome, and they got that idea from the Rangers. So yeah, I
Oh,
like that
really?
a lot. Yeah,
Hell, even the PVS 31s that's a hell of an upgrade compared to what the infantry had a decade ago. Because
yeah,
that was not anywhere close to even being considered standard in the infantry by any means.
yeah. And then looking at the army, like the big army, what they chose. I got to work with a couple guys in a course, and I got to see their choice that they picked over the PVS 31s, and I was just like, man, like you guys really missed the mark with these. I don't know what you want to call it, like Aldi brand 31s. The actual name escapes me right now.
Is in 2025, is the Marine Corps infantry a lot more laxed on the gear that you're allowed to use, like personal gear you can purchase and implement, and how you set up your kit more? Is it still, or does it vary a lot by unit?
I'd say they're a lot more relaxed. Again, when I originally came in 2020, Second Marine Division was finally getting away from a division wide gear SOP.
Mm-hmm.
So I caught like the very back end of that. But yeah, especially I'd say it does vary from unit to unit, but I'd say a lot of gunners, they definitely make it where dudes can wear like whatever they want, even getting into the realm of like wearing different types of like multicam versus coyote tan. I've seen a plethora of that my time in the fleet.
Mm. Yeah, we had an MSOL in the embassy security program. My last CO was an imbecile of an infantry officer, and like one of the first things he did when he got to our unit was establish a MSOL wide gear SOP that was not applicable to what we were doing at all, and he would not hear anything else about it. And of course, this is a guy who, though lack of deployment and other things, that's a different conversation, was in the Marine Corps for 20 years, and that's all he knew was everybody's gear had to be set up exactly the same regardless of billet. Like, it did not matter. He was like, you all will wear your TAPS rig the same exact way over your plate carrier.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of that. I've even had the opportunity to talk some commanders out of those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I found to do that is just to show them, like show them, hey, if the grenadier sets his gear up the same way the rifleman or the automatic rifleman sets his gear up, it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like you might have seen our video, but like the automatic rifleman video where the dude's storing 22 magazines, like that guy cannot wear his gear the same way that the team leader or the grenadier does.
And that was
So
what a big thing I tried driving home with my old CO. Because before I was a detachment commander, I had the M27 and had double, triple the amount of magazines of everybody else. And I'm like, the gear cannot be set up the same. I remember we even did like a little fashion show. I set up three guys completely different. I was like, here's your basic rifleman guy. Here's your detachment commander, assistant detachment commander position. And I was like, here's your M27 guys, your automatic rifleman. And he was like, oh, that's cool. No. I was like, I hate you so much.
yeah, and then what I preach to my guys is just the practicality. And I've even made some waves just like in the small bit of the infantry community I can influence because
Mhm.
again, kind of going back to the Marines just wearing like the 3 mag placard. If you got your ruck on and you're doing a movement to contact and you can't access grenades and you can't self medicate because your belt is in the bottom of your main pack,
Yeah.
like you're putting you and the dudes next to you at risk because you can't access critical gear.
Mhm.
So it's not necessarily it needs to all look the same. You just need to be able to fight with certain tools and be able to reach them all yourself.
Sure. Now, for the listeners, there are some things that are important to standardize. How many tourniquets you may carry. Some units are really big on like where the IFAC is on everybody's kit. Like, there is some things that are okay to standardize that make sense for like unit cohesion.
Yeah, I agree. Like a SOP for my guys is we all carry our IFACs and our fanny packs or nut rucks. Like that's exactly what we do.
Are nut rucks a lot more popular in the infantry now?
I would say so because I think more dudes are. I don't know why, but more dudes are straying away from using belts. I've noticed that a lot.
No, and I've seen that even on the civilian side, probably since the end of 2023. And I think probably like all of the footage and everything from Ukraine and everything, obviously it changed everybody's mind on how everything freaking works. But a lot of guys have moved away from belts if they are not a like belt kit LBE style person to begin with. I know I've moved away from a belt, and I wore a belt through the whole back half of my Marine Corps career. You know, I was running a plate carrier with 10 or so mags on it, and then I would also have a belt with a pistol, you know, doing embassy work, plus another 6 to 8 mags on it, plus dump pouch, plus IFAC, like the whole thing. Um, I definitely have liked moving away from the belt a little bit more. It was one of those things like once I got out of the Marine Corps and I was setting up like all my civilian gear, I was like, well, this is what I know. Like, this is what I did. And so I just kept doing that until one day I was like, well, what if I did it differently?
Yeah, and something I noticed that we made a video about it or a short, but it was because I have to run a pistol. It's just the gear that I'm told to run, and I also wear a ruck all the time. And it was either mount the pistol on my chest or wear the pistol somewhere else. So we just started mounting our belts on our inner belt, like the Velcro one,
Mm-hmm.
and that works just fine because you can still wear your ruck, still wear your fanny pack, and all that stuff.
Yeah, see, that's what I do is I just run it on my normal pants belt, and if I do bring my belt with me, the belt just goes, you know, in the top of my rucksack or whatever, and it can be deployed later. Because like
Yeah.
wearing, some people don't, even if they just put their pistol directly on their normal belt and they wear a drop leg holster. Some people still don't like wearing a holster while they ruck. It personally for me, it does not bother me at all. But some people that have personal preference about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm running like a padded, like drop leg holster. I think it's from Shaw Concept or something like that. But yeah, no, I get what you mean.
Is the infantry still rocking Berettas? You guys over to SIGs now?
Yeah, I'm tracking this as a hot topic, but yeah, we're running SIGs, unfortunately.
Oh no. What? So I'm
Yeah.
curious. What has your guys' commands told you about that stuff? Are you guys like not allowed to carry condition one or anything anymore, or have they not really passed down
So
any guidance?
to be honest with you, I don't think in the conventional realm, those guys like our commands are not in the loop as much on the current hot topic in social media.
They still think
So it
uniforms
hasn't
are just
really.
flannels.
Yeah, it's not really a big topic there, but the younger guys like myself, it's like, man, I really never want to run this pistol condition one. uh, I will say the first time I picked up an M18, we were at a pistol range, we were shooting Berettas, and the SIG guys actually came out and gave us like a 2-day instructional piece on the SIG, the M18.
Mhm.
And the first time I shot it, it was nice to shoot, but then again, I'm holding this like probably 30-year-old Beretta versus a new age pistol, and yeah, it feels nice, but I don't know, man. And I do a lot of stalking, and I'm probably never going to feel comfortable with that thing pointing at me.
I liked my Beretta, but I had no problems with my Beretta, to be completely honest. Even though it
Yeah.
was older than dog shit.
Oh yeah, mine was like bluing. That's how old that thing was.
Let's see, the embassy guys, right when probably in the last 6 months before I got out, were all switching from Beretta to Glocks, but they were specifically switching to Glocks to be standardized with State Department security guys. So logistically, it made more sense for us, obviously, with limited logistics and everything at embassies and all that kind of stuff. So while the Fleet Marine Corps was going towards SIGs, the embassy side was going towards Glocks.
Yeah, that I never really noticed that, but yeah, that's pretty interesting.
I mean, it
Yeah,
really it all comes down to logistics and everything, and then probably also quals because we qualled on the 229 because that was the old standard issue option for regional security officers for the Department of State was the SIG 229. So we from the beginning, even before the Marine Corps guys were standard issued Glocks, we had to qual every 6 months or whatever on both the Beretta, the SIG, and the Glock. You had to shoot the same exact qual 3 times with each pistol.
Did you notice a big difference between how those like pistols performed during that?
Normally people shot worse with the Sig P2, the P229. Um,
Okay.
and I think it was just because like it within itself was a much lighter gun with a heavier trigger compared to the Beretta, who had very nicely like worked in triggers, and then obviously you go to single action.
Yeah.
And then Glocks, like a Glock's a Glock. Like it really doesn't matter what Glock you shoot. If you've shot a Glock, you've shot all the Glocks, unless you start talking about like major caliber differences. Um,
Yeah, I'm personally a Glock guy. My dad comes from a police officer background. I've been shooting Glocks my whole life, so no, I wish we could carry on like our own actual pistols. That'd be nice.
Now the 229 Sig did have a little bit thicker of a handle compared to the Glock and the Beretta, which affected some people. And then it also had, I don't think it was shorter than the Glock 19 barrel, but it definitely seemed like it in your hand. For whatever reason, people just struggled with the 229. I actually really liked the 229. I actually went out and bought my own 229 on the civilian side and had it for like 6 months, and then did not like my civilian 229 and sold it because there was just something about the 229 that was 20 years old or whatever just worked in real nice. And I was like, yeah, this is fine.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as like plate carriers though and all of that kind of stuff, obviously like attachments may vary, but are they still kind of strict on like what type of like large supply items you guys are allowed to use, or are they relaxed on that kind of stuff even so at this point?
So I would say the in the plate carrier realm, the conventional forces are getting pretty relaxed with that. The unit I'm in and the unit I'm attached to, they're actually it's not specifically stated, but they're letting guys run their own like plate carriers. I'd say the biggest issue with that though that I've seen is we're issued like the SAPI plate,
Yeah.
we're issued the soft armor that goes behind that.
Mm-hmm.
That soft armor is bigger than the actual plate carrier itself. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've caught a few guys, wearing their own plate carrier, and it's like, hey man, where's your soft armor at? And it's like, oh, it wouldn't fit in this cry. And I'm like, well, don't you think that like that probably is limiting the amount of personal protection you have? And it's like, it's just a risk I'm willing to take. I'm like, okay, sure, man, you do you. Uh, so that's a consideration, but I definitely think across the board, the units are getting a little bit more relaxed with that. But I think when it comes down to it and dudes are actually experiencing frag for the first time, either from FPV drones or artillery, they're probably going to want to throw that soft armor on pretty quick.
Yeah. Has there been a large push towards like the abdominal and the groin soft armor at all, or is that not really kind of made its way to the Marine Corps yet?
I'd say no. Like Marine Corps wide, definitely not. In my own little world, I've kind of made it popular again. Just showing guys videos of just how fragmentation works and explaining to new guys like you're more than likely not going to be shot in actual combat. You're going to be accepting fragmentation from that bullet that hit the tree that then splintered into 1,000 different pieces. That's what you're going to be taking.
Sure.
Yeah, so hopefully one day that becomes a little bit more popular before guys have to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Are you guys still all pretty much rocking like level 4 standard sappy side plates, or are you guys rocking like the full wraparound soft armor?
I believe the issued side plates are level 3A, and then the soft armor, and this is just from top of my head, I'm not exactly sure, so I could definitely be wrong, but I believe the sappies are level 3A, and the soft armor that then complements it might make it level 4. Again, I might be wrong, but I think that's the way the system is supposed to work.
Gotcha. Well, obviously, just from the gear realm itself, the infantry has changed a lot since COVID, which I think is good, and it probably is a result of guys that were in the lower ends of the infantry and whatnot towards the tail end of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. The guys who probably watched some level of like early YouTube influencers and whatnot, eventually, obviously, getting older and getting promoted and stuff, and starting to change things compared to the salty COs and whatnot that were basically pre 2020. Um,
Mhm.
But I'm really more curious about kind of how the mindset for the infantry has changed as far as like, obviously the shift from the Middle East to the Pacific, how that changes your guys kind of the training mentality, how you guys expect to actually operate in these different environments, considering the fact that logistics is not going to be guaranteed. Air assets are going to be a lot more contested or limited. So I kind of want to dive into that topic, obviously within OPSEC reason. But you were around, really you said towards the beginning of 2020, getting to the fleet. So, what are some big changes you think you have seen in kind of infantry mindset from 5 years ago to now, where we're really focusing on the Pacific?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest thing that's definitely pushed down to us and preached the most is the whole decentralized command philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And when they say that, like they're meaning like staff sergeant and sergeant, like squad leaders operating on their own, very, very far away from logistics, potentially even having to acquire like their own food, like stressing that to an extreme. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the biggest push I've seen for the infantry. And that, again, that comes from obviously the ramifications of operating in a littoral environment, but also the lessons learned like in the Ukraine and Russia conflict. We did a PME once where we talked about that Russian logistical supply train that was stretching on for miles and miles
Mm-hmm.
and miles,
Oh,
and how like one
hey, hold up here.
decentralized
Hold up.
like NTO level dude to a column we buy one singular aircraft.
Can you got really blurry for a second. Whatever you started talking about 10 seconds ago, can you redo that? Because I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, just about the air.
About yeah, starting like right at when you were referencing the Russian convoy, the old miles long Russian convoy.
Yeah, yeah, sure thing. So yeah, that Russian convoy that was stretching for miles towards the beginning of the war,
Mm-hmm.
one decentralized leader could have made that decision where if you just split that convoy up, like, or you just split off the road into a column, you would not be destroyed by one singular aircraft. So yeah, decentralized leadership is probably the biggest thing being pushed down to the Marine Corps infantry right now.
Do you think there's really any shift in um, tactics or just general battle space management compared to pre 2020 kind of mindset?
I would definitely say the thought process of we're not going to be fighting, these insurgent level adversaries. It's going to be something peer on peer.
Mm-hmm.
So these small unit leaders might have to make decisions that could have like strategic consequences. That's another consideration, I guess.
Sure. Do you guys practice much, whether it's during FTXs or any type of deployment workup, anything like that? Um, do you guys talk at all about the break in like the medical logistics chain and just even either having a doc or no doc at all, and kind of caring for casualties and whatnot in a prolonged environment if Casevac medevac is not available?
So I guess the probably the best answer for that and the new pre-deployment requirements like they're making everybody have is you have to have like a certain level of like combat lifesaver trained guys, and that number has been bumped up. So my first deployment, it was like you had to have one per like platoon just to be able to assist the corpsman.
Mm-hmm.
And now the numbers are like 25 to 50% of that unit has to be CLS.
Oh wow.
Yes.
I mean that's probably good because if your whole platoon has one CLS guy and he gets you know domed with an FPV drone, you're kind of shit out of luck.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, I would say yeah.
Um,
Like I mean, if you think 25%, like if one guy per fire team is CLS, that's pretty good.
yeah, it's a decent number. And then I've also seen a bigger push now for more guys carrying just extra medical, like just not accepting like the issued IFAC they give you, but like getting some spare parts. Like me personally, I carry at bare minimum 4 tourniquets on me.
Yeah, I know. I talked. I think it was 2 episodes ago when I had the Gorilla Medic on. We talked a lot about expanding the thought process behind medical supply at the small unit level, and basically either each person carrying some portion of extra gear, or like fire teams being assigned different aspects of like expansion for the corpsman or the combat medic that's assigned to the platoon, or if you're even luckier, kind of the squad. Um, and that, I feel like that's definitely become a lot more common topic as far as just shared small unit logistics and whatnot.
Yeah, and I mean, I can only really speak to my own team, which is around 6 guys. But within my team, we don't have a corpsman. We have three CLS trained guys. We have a CLS bag, a Polis litter, and one of the guys has been given a few classes on like blood transfusions. So that's just like kind of the level they're at in terms of medical, just on the team side.
Mm-hmm. Which I guess that's another big question too. Is like before COVID, right when they started kind of messing around with how the infantry was set up. Most traditionally, you would see like 12 plus one squads, 3 teams of 4 plus a squad leader, and then you would at times have an attachment of some sort, whether it be like the ROs attached to your squad if he's not at the platoon level or something like that. How are the Marine Corps infantry squads set up now? And obviously, that's a very loaded question. Depending, let's just think like 0311s and most similar types. Like how's the traditional 03 squad set up at this point?
So it's stays pretty much the same. I'm seeing squads of like 13 guys, and again, this can vary on unit and their overall readiness, like to deploy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're sticking right now to the 13-man squads, working with three fire teams, and I guess probably the biggest shift from when you were in or like pre 2020 is them getting rid of the like squad automatic weapon, replacing that with the M27. And now, probably at like the squad level, you actually have a DM that carries a 7.62 rifle. That's probably the biggest shift I've seen for the basic squad.
I definitely am a big fan of the 13-man squads over like some of the Army's like 10-man squads, where it's like 2 teams of 5 and one's a patrol leader and one's an assistant patrol leader with a team leader in each. And I like 13-man squads. Obviously, you can divide that up between assault, support, security internally. You have room for casualties, more manpower. Like I like beefier rifle squads. Personal preference of mine. Um,
Yeah, I'd probably counter you with that because from working, with 13-man squads and then also getting a little bit of experience, like the Army's like 9 or 10.
mhm,
I think the biggest thing is just the three-team concept, and that getting it's not impossible to control, but when you're talking terrain like jungle or like just eastern North Carolina, it's much easier, in my opinion, to control 2 teams of 6 as opposed to 3 teams of 4.
mhm,
Um, so like if whenever I've had the opportunity to actually control a whole squad, I've just divided up into 2 teams of 6. And in terms of training, we're perfect scenario. I'm going to have 13 guys.
mhm,
And from what I've seen is when dudes go on deployment, they typically lose a couple dudes. So now they're rocking with like 3 teams of 3.
mhm.
Um, so if you do all your training on the front end, already working off of 2 teams of 6, now if you lose a couple guys, your tactics don't really change that much.
Sure.
But again, 100% personal preference and just from what I've seen.
Yeah. I guess it really depends on the type of leader as well. Like for me, managing 3 teams, if I have confidence in my team leaders, is no issue. Like even on the embassy side, our detachments had 3 team leaders plus detachment commander, assistant detachment commander. So I'm used to always operating those 3 elements. But I could see what you're saying about like the jungle side of things, where terrain dependent. If you start getting a little too spread out, it definitely can be hard to kind of bounce back and forth. Um, I guess for me personally, like I like having that third team to fill the unknowns. Like if I have one
Yep.
team that's directly engaged in something and that second fire team is supporting that first fire team, if a advantageous opportunity presents itself, I like having kind of that little reserve element that I might be able to pull and just take advantage of those little scenarios.
Yeah, and everything in the Marine Corps is like trying to prepare you for the next two levels up. I think that's probably what separates it the most from the Army. So like your team leader, squad leader, you're preparing them to potentially have to take on, a platoon,
Mm-hmm.
or like even a platoon plus sized element. So I
Yeah.
think that's probably the biggest. That's the main reason why we run a 3-man team or 3-man or 3-team squads is
Sure.
because in the horrible scenario, you now have to become the platoon commander. You're now used to controlling that three type of element. So no, I
Yeah,
get that.
yeah. If you're used to running two fire teams, and then it's like, all right, now you have three platoons, it definitely would be just overload on you, just
Yeah,
mentally.
exactly.
I mean, two platoons itself enough if would be a hard task because you're already jumping such a large billet, but then having a whole other asset would be it would definitely be a little bit harder. Platoon leaders, I think, is my favorite role. Um, for somebody like I mean myself and a lot of guys who just kind of naturally are able to take charge. They like coordinating guys. Like as much as I love getting into it, I very much like coordinating teams and coordinating the fighting effort more so than I do actually doing the fighting myself. One of my old teammates who was a fucking phenomenal 0311, one of the best things he ever said to me, and I've carried it for like 10 years now, is that a squad leader's most valuable weapons is his fire teams. And that's
Yep.
even more so true at the platoon level, talking about your platoons. Like, I think the strategic element, the small leader strategic element of that is just so fascinating. You get any higher than that, you got to go to the talk, and that sucks.
Oh yeah, no, believe me, I'm right now, again, I've stayed at the team level most of my time. The types of teams that I've controlled have varied, but yeah, I very much so enjoy the team leader aspect of things. And I've had to been pulled out a couple times to control like a larger element. And I don't know, man, I think the team leader is just about as far as I ever want to move up in terms of command.
Platoon leader and assistant platoon leader, or just platoon sergeant, depending on what branch or unit you're in, definitely comes with a lot more. Once you get past squad leader, there's a lot of administrative work that comes with it all.
Yeah, and I think this is something that's always piqued my interest is, working with units like the Royal Marines, reading about guys that are in like the, Israeli Defense Force, for example. You have guys who have been in those billets for years.
Mm,
And in the Marine Corps, that's kind of weird because, typically guys hit the fleet. A couple of those lance corporals might immediately become team leaders because they're just filling a gap that needs to be filled.
mm,
Like Royal Marines, they have guys who have been in that specific billet for like almost 3 to 4 years, and they are one hell of a squad automatic rifleman, grenadier, that type of stuff. And
mm.
I don't know. I think the Marine Corps at times could probably use more of that of a guy who like takes a lot of pride in his specific billet and profession.
Sure.
But again, just an opinion.
A little bit bigger picture, but do you know that there is actually a very specific doctrinal reason why the promotional process somewhat works the way that it is, and why you rotate duty stations, and why command like do you know the reason behind all of that?
Probably not off the top of my head, but it sounds like you do.
So the process behind it was, I believe it was between the world wars was the time period when this really became a thing. Was higher military command and the government itself, the United States government, did not want personnel within a unit or unit commanders to become loyal to the unit or the command of the unit more so than the service as a whole, and hence the country. Because in a lot of other national federal militaries and whatnot throughout the world, you don't see it as much to the Western countries, some of the Western European countries, because they're a little more civilized. But like, if you go to Russia, you go to a lot of Asian militaries, especially if you go to Africa and South America, units are more loyal to their unit command structure than they are the branch of service as a whole. And then hence beyond that, like the country. So the United States specifically changed like all of that doctrine and all of that mindset on the promotion process and rotating command every couple of years and doing all of that to keep guys loyal to the branch and not the unit itself.
Hmm. No, yeah, I mean that makes 100% sense, and I could definitely see how that like plays out and affects everything. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, completely off topic from everything we're talking about, but I thought that
No,
was interesting. Um,
that's all good.
do you guys still get a lot of use out of like the Mojave Desert and everything and 29 Palms as much, or have you guys kind of started changing your training environment more to fit the Pacific narrative?
So this is going to sound crazy, but we use 29 Palms as a training ground for the Pacific narrative. So the way those situations are painted is that you are on 29 Palms Island and you're defending said 29 Palms Island, and they'll even paint it to you as like jungle, and you can't, like, if you leave like vehicles can't leave the roads maybe in some scenarios. um I think it's just because the freedom of maneuver and just the tempo that you can maintain over there. That's probably why they do that. Is that the best source of training when you're talking about a littoral environment? Probably not. But that's kind of their answer for it.
Interesting. I know, like, when I was in, a lot of the talk with China and everything was the general thought process was they always told us they were like from probably like 2015 to like 2019 ish. They were always like war with China by 2030. Like that was just something they always told the forces. It's what the news told the public. Like that just was the message was war with China in 2030. And then towards the tail end of me getting out, 2019, 2020, they were like, all right, war with China 2028. And then I remember probably like 2023, they were like, we're looking at war with China by like 2026, maybe 2025. And now we're in 2025. So as like the message from the Pentagon and all that kind of stuff that disseminates down into the the lower ends of the armed services and whatnot, has that message kind of changed at all? Do they have a different narrative for that kind of stuff now? What is their message to all of you guys?
I've heard a lot of differing answers to this. Talked to a couple Intel guys, and they're saying like war with China by all the way up to 2050, and then other guys will tell you war with China by 2030, and then a couple of guys will even tell you we're never going to go to war with China. So
Interesting.
I think right now the message is just like simply unclear on whether or not that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really people don't know, and they're just trying to be prepared for worst case scenario.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. I definitely think there's China's one. China's odd because like if you look at like the Taiwan thing as a whole, a lot of the kind of message behind a lot of that has gone to China's wartime exercises and everything are so big at this point. They could just invade Taiwan during an exercise, and like you would have never known they were doing a workup to actually invade Taiwan. So like
Oh yeah. No,
it could
definitely.
it could be happening right now, and I just haven't checked my phone, or it'll happen in 10 years. Like we have no idea, and we have no way of knowing really.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is that like we have to be prepared for is if they do go for that, it's not going to be like us defending Taiwan. It's going to be us basically invading Taiwan and taking it from, the CCP.
Or the
And
various
that's
other
like
islands.
exactly, and that's what a lot of our exercises or like scenarios, war games are geared towards is us invading a country that
Mm-hmm.
is actually friendly to us. It's just been it was before this, it was just invaded by a not so friendly country.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the whole thing with Okinawa.
Interesting. Is there who would you guys say you guys are probably doing the most like bilateral training with right now as far as our Pacific partners? Is there any of them that comes to mind?
Um, again, most of my time has been on the East Coast, so a lot of this information is just from, guys that I've worked with in the past. But I know that Marines are constantly in Australia, constantly training with the Aussies.
Mm-hmm.
The Aussies are also constantly over the United States training. And then we also have like our Asian partners, a lot of countries there, like the Filipinos, the Taiwanese, everybody. I'd probably say the strongest ally over there would definitely be the Australians because
Sure.
their values are much more geared towards like a Western country than anything.
Yeah. Has the conversation of bringing back, I guess it really hasn't been long enough, but how's the general infantry's mindset and opinion been about taking away scout snipers?
Oof. So this is definitely a touchy topic, but
It's a hot topic.
yeah, and I'd say probably the biggest issue of that, and again, this hits close to me, is just because I'm in a surveillance and target acquisition role, but we don't have any snipers in the team.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the infantry has like mixed feelings about this. On the higher side, they say that snipers did it to themselves just because of a lot of bad instances where snipers were basically, the way higher looks at it is they're just acting different. You know, in the Marine Corps, that's not good to try and act like an individual sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the sniper side of things, they obviously want the job because the job is pretty cool. You go out there to a final firing position and take out a target. Uh, I would say from a personal perspective, teaching, and I like the way the Army does it, and and their scout platoons, they can have like a sniper attachment, but they still have scouts,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the biggest problem with the Marine Corps is right now they're teaching dudes how to be scouts, and they're teaching them the whole period of instruction that they used to teach scout snipers, just taking out the long range precision shooting.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what they're going towards right now, and I think it's a good thing. Um, I do think there are some unrealistic aspects of things that you train to in scout snipers that they would fail guys for, because they would run dudes through the scout sniper course and not graduate a class because they would drop everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another reason why they went away, is because they have to, answer to that is like, hey, we've only created, 20 scout snipers this year. But we spent this amount of money doing that to get this product. So it's kind of like a numbers game, but also the skills that you can learn as a scout are not. I would say the community was kind of gate kept for that reason, and there's a lot of negative connotations that go along with saying something's gate kept. But
Sure.
I don't know, very touchy topic, I guess.
I know you said earlier that a lot of squads now have like a dedicated 7.62 rifle at this point. Was that kind of purposefully done to give that semi long range accuracy a role somewhere in the infantry still, and basically have like an actual designated marksman guy as a replacement to the snipers, or was that just a happy coincidence?
So snipers wouldn't be happy about saying that it was a replacement for them, but I think that's kind of big Marine Corps' answer to it, is if we give, one out of every three squads a designated marksman, that's a good enough answer for this thing. So yeah, I think that was big Marine Corps' answer to getting rid of scout snipers, and just making designated marksman a thing.
Are there schools to support the long range aspect of that, essentially billet and everything still, or are they just handing out rifles like they did M27s during the first IAR rollout, and they're just like, all right, you're all automatic riflemen again?
So I think it's a little bit of both. There are, in some instances, just handing guys these rifles, but then it's with the intent of you will now become the designated marksman, or it's the reverse. Like, I'm going to send this guy to designated marksman course, and then he's going to get the rifle. Because the way those are like issued out is like a platoon will have probably two designated marksman rifles, and then there's going to be a guy that's filling that billet until he goes to school and fails, or he goes to school and passes.
Yeah, yeah. Even just I mean, whole scout sniper conversation aside, designated marksman at the infantry level, squad or platoon, is a great asset, nonetheless.
Oh
Um,
yeah, like it's a good thing.
Historically, though, it just sucks they got rid of the scout snipers. But I agree. I think they did it to themselves a little bit. I was barracked with the scout snipers at Quantico, um, and it just seems like there was always some level of problems at times. Um,
Yeah, and I mean they would never like to hear that, but and this is another thing too, is what they brought to the table was that long range precision fire capability. The other thing they brought to the table was the surveillance and target acquisition role.
and they were very good at
Um,
that. They were very good at that.
they they were, but another thing too is you can teach guys how to
Sure.
do the surveillance and target acquisition role
Hmm.
and take out the precision marksmanship. Um, and then yeah, Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there that have a lot of differing opinions about this, but I just think that the idea of conducting this long range infiltration and not be seen by FPV drones or thermal drones is kind of a fairy tale world at this point. The introduction of drones at this scale is you're probably not going to be crawling and stalking hundreds of meters without being seen by something.
So that brings up
Um,
something I had on the side. I mean, what is big military at this point essentially doing for the anti-thermal conversation, especially at, the Marine Corps infantry?
um, so there's a couple thought processes around this as well because you have thermal drones out there, and then typically the way we're seeing these drones employed is you'll have your hunter drone,
Mm-hmm.
and it can see either through day or thermal vision for night. And
Mm-hmm.
then you'll have your killer drone. Your killer drone is obviously typically FPV drone flown, or it's a drop type of drone.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the killer drones are used during the daytime because it's typically a disposable type of drone.
Yeah.
Not a lot of them are being flown at night because they have to have the capabilities to be flown at night, which obviously that costs money. That puts a strain on logistics to just be, detonating night vision devices, at a rapid rate.
Sure.
And already these daytime drones, it appears that they're only working roughly like 2 out of 10 actually hit their target.
Mm-hmm.
So you can
Yeah.
imagine that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just
Uh,
gonna say, yeah, um when I was on the Longhouse podcast recently, and I was talking to a guy that works, heavily with the Army and developing doctrine a lot. He was talking about how drones aren't actually as successful as we may think. The endless amount of drone footage that we have at this point makes us believe otherwise. But um, even in Ukraine, they're not even in the top three leading causes for casualties at this point in time.
yeah, most of it's artillery, and then probably the Marine Corps' biggest answer to that is just conducting operations at night. Like, I know it sounds crazy, especially from like the GWAT era of things, but conducting more operations at night will probably lead to a larger success because those drones are only hitting like maybe 2 out of 10 during the day.
Mm-hmm.
At night, those numbers are pushed way out, so it's probably projected more like 1 out of 20 will work at night. Um, so a lot of operations at night, a lot of training at night that takes place because even myself, I'm a firm believer that if you can do it in periods of low visibility, you can definitely do it in periods of high visibility.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, that goes back to like Erwin Rommel in his book Infantry Attacks. Like the Germans were doing a lot of training at night before night vision was even a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big believer of low visibility training.
Is there any like commercial products or anything that guys have really pushed, or any homemade stuff that's just trying to protect against thermal? I mean, outside of drones, you've got designated marksmen with thermal scopes and just all that kind of stuff too.
From my point of view and my perspective, again, being part of surveillance and target acquisition, it is a lot of like field craft type stuff, and then just using the terrain as an advantage. In like a jungle or like woodland type of environment, like you're just trying to stay in as much concealed position as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're talking about like a 29 Palms type environment, a lot of desert, you can see so far that your actual like personal vision will more than likely outrange any type of like FPV drone that's being flown.
Mm.
You can see out to like 20 kilometers in terrain like that. So
Interesting.
yeah, those personal countermeasures range from everything to like a painted umbrella to just like screens, like taking the issued caminet and just making a screen out of it and just using that as a form of concealment.
Gotcha. Are you guys putting anything with the cami netting um, for like the anti-thermal aspect of it all, or is it just really working hard on like the terrain usage and the natural vegetation and whatnot?
It's really the terrain usage using the natural vegetation and again the mindset of in a peer-to-peer war, it's not. And again, this is another kind of not meaning to go back to the sniper thing, but you're probably not going to be making these huge movements. Um, like we preach in the Marine Corps, you need to be able to do 20 kilometer to 32 kilometer movement to contact.
Hmm.
If we go to war with the near peer, that'll probably happen for like the first maybe week or two, but then after that, it's going to end up being a pretty stagnant thing,
Yeah.
with very limited, like very limited offensive movements like that.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, definitely the long range movements is just not even a thing in Ukraine at this point, and pretty much everybody's mobilized is mechanized or supported by mechanized units. That there's not guys doing, like you said, 15, 20 plus kilometer movement to contact.
Yeah, you just have to put yourself in the right perspective because again, we still train to that. Like me and my guys, like we'll do like maybe like a 10K insert and then conduct surveillance on an objective.
Which is good.
Because yeah, we have to be prepared to, there could be a small level conflict that pops off before China that
Hmm.
they might have an FPV drone capability, but maybe no thermals.
Hmm.
Um, or maybe they do have the thermal capability, but no way to actually target you. That's another thing.
Right. I know I've talked with several guests about um, the drone topic in detail, and for the most part, it seems like a lot of people think that drones are here to stay, just not in the capacity that they are being used now in Russia and Ukraine in the next near peer adversary war. Like, if we go to war with China, the logistics of cheap disposable drones, even for the military, is going out the window. Like, you're not going to be able to just throw endless FPV drones at problems. Um, it's just not. It's literally not logistically possible. We both countries independently would not have the materials to do so. China would probably be able to do it a little longer than we would. Um, but it's not like Ukraine and Russia where the conflict is so isolated to that one corner of the world and they just have endless access to the outside commercial market. Like, if we go to
Yeah,
war
and I
with
mean, a lot of
China,
the products,
like the whole Pacific is on fire.
exactly, and a lot of the products that like Ukraine and Russia are receiving are from China.
Mm-hmm.
So I could only imagine that if that is a route for China themselves, the amount of sanctions and just the lack of resources that would be put on them, I'm interested to see if that how long that would actually be pursued. Also, they just have more advanced weapon systems, like precision guided munitions. Like they're probably going to lean more on that than
Yeah,
an onslaught of plastic drones.
yeah. I think it's good that people are considering the drone threat and everything. I just outside maybe the first few weeks, maybe in a few months of a war, I think it eventually, I think it fades out. I just don't personally see the logistics there to support it, especially in a wartime economy where it's probably smarter to put your limited access to the higher technology into like you said, like precision munitions and smart munitions and all that kind of stuff, other than cheap plastic drones to give to the infantry to crash into trees.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen my share of that.
Um, are you guys? I saw probably a few weeks ago at this point, is well, probably back in March or so, the Marine Corps launched its first like official drone unit. Are those guys infantrymen by trait? Are those guys like a whole other MOS now? How does that work?
I actually think they used a couple former 037s to do that. I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure it's a conglomerate of different MOSs.
Mm-hmm.
I do know though at about the company level, each company is getting like two actual drone operators. Like their MOS, their sole purpose in life is to fly unmanned systems. But I'm
Is
not
the
exactly sure about the drone team itself.
is the idea behind the systems operator still a thing in the infantry community, or is that kind of died and gone out?
Like the systems operator in terms of like small manned aircraft or like the medium range.
The small, because like I remember probably 2020. It was literally right as I was getting out. They were kind of playing around with the way the infantry units were going to be set up and everything. And one thing that they had added to this new testing era was a systems operator. I think at the squad level, who was basically able to do like the radio stuff. They messed around with like drones and maybe thermal devices, like any type of like small unit technology that would be issued out. Like he was your tech guy. Do they still have kind of that, or if they kind of went back into their own like little niche communities and stay in their lane.
Yeah, so right now it's kind of where at your company level you'll have one to two like actual systems operators where that is their MOS. It kind of works the same as like having a JTAC, like a company JTAC, and then like JFOs that split off and they kind of like work for the JTAC.
Yeah,
The systems operators, they'll send guys to like smaller drone schools, and then they'll kind of oversee the drone program within that company. That's kind of the way it's working right now.
gotcha. I did have a question from one of my guys who's one of the last assault men I was telling you about. He
Mhm.
wants to ask, how are attachments being used? 31s, 41s, 52s. Are they operating as weapon platoons, or do they get attached out to the line platoon individually?
Yeah, so in infantry battalions right now, they have their what they call a combined anti-armor team.
Mm-hmm.
It's the cat platoon. They're using either one or two cat platoons, and the way that works is that can be their own actual like maneuver force. Like they can do their own operations, and they'll get tasked out from typically like the battalion level,
Mm-hmm.
or they can be attached to a company, and then they can be used as like a screening element for that company. Much like the way light armored reconnaissance units are used. They can be their own maneuver force, or they can be attached to typically a battalion and then tasked out and potentially even attached to companies themselves.
And then second part of that question is how has the doctrine or tactics of the employment of weapon platoons changed with the new drone threat?
I'd say the probably the biggest thing that has changed itself is just the addition of our own UAS operators,
Mm-hmm.
um, and those working with like machine guns, mortars, the drones being used in like a forward observer role for the mortar platoons or mortar sections. I've seen a lot of that happening. Typically, they'll get attached to like a rifle squad, so like the or more so attached to a platoon or a company, and then in direct support of a rifle squad. And then that squad leader is working with the drone operator. They're finding targets and then prosecuting those targets with the mortars. Um,
Gotcha.
there's a lot of stuff put on squad leaders at this point, like very, very young sergeants and even corporals. Like they're tasking out machine guns, 60s, 60 millimeter mortars, and then coordinating all that through SUAS. There's a lot, pretty big burden put on those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we talked about that I think before the podcast really started and whatnot. Like a lot of young guys get thrown into these positions and are expected to do just a crazy amount. Whereas like back in the day, like during especially during GWAT, to get to corporal, let alone sergeant in the infantry, like you had to go through a whole contract. Now you've got guys in the infantry that are like corporals by like year 3. Um,
Yep.
like back in the day, that was fairly unheard of. Like if you were a corporal by the end of your first 4 years, you were a pretty squared away guy. Like that was not normal in the infantry, and that's just the way they slated out. The amount of ranks per MOS and just all that kind of stuff. It's definitely a lot different now.
Yeah. Now, if you're finishing your first contract as like a lance corporal, you've probably gotten in trouble at that point.
Yeah, terminal
Like I
rank.
picked up, yeah, I picked up a corporal within 2 years of being in the infantry. So
Damn, that would not fly back in the day.
yeah, definitely not. I know
But
that you
like,
probably at times have lance corporal platoon sergeants potentially.
um, but like back then, like if you had a sergeant in the infantry and he was either just a real senior squad leader or was even like in some limited cases moving up to like platoon leader if he was really squared away, like you knew that guy knew his shit. Like you weren't
Oh
getting
yeah,
just any sergeant. Like that sergeant was squared away.
yeah, and I think the biggest answer to that problem, because that guy was probably really squared away because he had probably done like 3 to 4 deployments, had a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since there's not a conflict to get that experience from, there a push is on for like the advanced schools for the infantry. So like uh, AIC, Advanced Infantryman's course. There's Advanced Machine Gunner's course, Mortarman's, anti-tank, and then the Infantry Small Unit Leaders course. Those are great things that dudes need to go to because it's how you get those experiences that'll help you be better at your job.
We didn't really dive into it earlier, but since we're just talking about the makeup of units and everything, with a lot of the push moving away from the SAW and the M27 being more standardized, how has that kind of worked from the support side of everything as far as um, at the squad level tactics? Because you used to have the SAW, that guy was a big, element of the support. Now everybody's, essentially an automatic rifleman. Is there a focus in training on guys being able to actually fulfill an automatic rifleman billet, or does it go back to that thing where guys are just tossed rifles and told they're automatic riflemen now? Like, what's kind of happened with that as far as like big Marine Corps all the way down to the infantry?
So the way I've seen it used, and again, this probably differs from unit to unit. I can at least speak on the two infantry units I've been attached to. That automatic rifleman role is still there. It's just simply a matter of how many magazines that guy carries, and then he, if assigned a rate of fire by the squad leader, follows the automatic rifleman rate of fire, and everyone else is like shooting like one, like a sustained rate of fire. Everyone else is shooting like one round every five.
Mm-hmm.
He'll shoot like a burst every five or something like that.
Sure.
That's kind of the way that it's implemented. Again, probably not the best answer, but that is what they're doing right now.
Do you guys like the implementation of the M27 over the dedicated SAW, or is that also a pretty touchy subject?
Uh, Completely personal preference. I mean, I think a belt-fed weapon is at the team level allows the team leader to, at his level to put whatever enemy he's facing in a combined arms dilemma, like fixing one person with a saw and then destroying him with the grenadier. Like ideally, the fire team's makeup is, your team leader. I wish we would have kept the 203, but we got rid of it because the 203 is incompatible with the M27.
Yeah.
Team leader has a 203. Your grenadier has a dedicated like grenade launcher, like the 320.
Mm-hmm.
Automatic rifleman has the saw, and then one rifleman out of every squad has that DM capability. I think that would have been probably the best course of implementation if they would have done it again.
Yeah. Because how many saws were in the squad? There only used to be one saw per squad, sometimes two per squad before the M27 rollout, right?
From what I saw, it was one per team. So
They
the
have one
at the
per team.
squad level, yeah, at the squad level they had three per squad. And then
Okay.
what you could do is mass your a tactic I saw guys do is mass their saws and establish an internal base of fire for your squad,
Mm-hmm.
and then everybody else can maneuver while you're doing that.
Gotcha. Obviously, the automatic rifleman role is very popular on the civilian side right now, um, and mainly just because the civilian commercial market now supports the automatic rifleman role amongst the civilians, and belt feds is still a very limited access thing. It's kind of on its way up. There's some companies doing some things, um,
Yep.
but for most people, like if you don't have a good group of guys to train with regularly and actually follow some internal SOPs, there's no reason to have a belt fed other than just have a belt fed and have fun. Like, three guys don't need a belt fed. But if you've got 15 or so guys that you train with locally, now we're talking belt fed stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's the belt fed is definitely a awesome weapon, a great tool. Ideally, civilians could get their hands on more grenade launchers because guys don't want like bad guys don't want to be around when HE starts exploding next to them. Like the saw, the belt fed weapon will keep their heads down,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why you have HE assets. I think I would really hope that like grenade launchers and like the ammunition that goes along with them would be available to civilians because like
I'm so
I don't know
glad
if the
you brought this
military
up.
has it. I feel like if the military can have it, why can't the civilians have it?
Roughly 6 feet in front of me is my Grenadier build rifle,
Yeah.
just leaning against the shelf. Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
37 mil, not 40 mil, but I have talked briefly recently about the expansion of the grenadier role for the civilian, and unfortunately, obviously HE is not a thing.
Yeah.
Even if you got 40 mil over 37 mil, like you still can't really get HE. But there's still a lot of other stuff that goes into it and whatnot that I think is applicable. Smokes, flares, bangers and whatnot, and it all serves as a good training role towards the day that you may actually get, HE access grenade launchers. I'd
Yeah,
rather I'd
that's
rather have the guy.
truly
Go ahead.
that's truly what actually destroys like a small unit level target is the HE itself. Like
Mhm.
belt feds are awesome and they're exactly what you need, but then like the final like piece to the pie is the grenadier roll itself.
Yeah, not having. Do you guys use a lot of like the six rotary um, grenade launchers at this point?
That is at my particular unit we do. It's also like primarily a mounted unit. Uh, I think that's probably the big reason why we use them. I'd probably say in a Victor unit, you're probably rolling with like maybe one issued per squad, but if they take that on every mission, that's 100% of like their platoon commander.
Yeah, not having the rifle mounted launcher, I think, was a step in the wrong direction. Personally, it's just more shit you got to haul around. If I've got a solo, separate launcher, it has its place by all means. But again, like if you're not mounted, um, you start talking about some, you know, just extra shit you got to haul around.
Yeah, there was a. I took a picture of him, but we were in 29 Palms, and there is this poor private first class walking around with. And he was a shorter guy too, which I think made it worse. But he was carrying an M27 with a suppressor with the SCO that we have, so the variable optic. He had a night optic that went with the SCO, and then he also was carrying a 32, the M32, the 6 cylinder grenade launcher. And I was like, man, that is a lot of stuff. And then he more than likely had PVS 31s in his pocket, which when guys get issued PVS 31s, they also get issued a PVS 14 just in case.
Yeah.
So that guy was definitely loaded out.
Yeah, not much of a light infantry concept in a lot of things. The Marine Corps, the Marine Corps definitely is a very heavy infantry mindset. There's back in the day a little bit more, I think so, but probably since I'd say 2010, like the infantry definitely kind of gets weighed down with a lot of shit, and maybe that's just the reality of moving forward into the future and having different technology and different capabilities and all of that. But we've definitely moved away from a light infantry mindset for the most part, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes back down to just like the conflict because I I show my guys all the time, but just pictures of like early GWAT pictures of guys and how much gear they carried. And this is something I wish we did better at in training. And it kind of ties into like the chest rig versus plate carrier argument. But dudes in training, like their own backyard training, will have barely any gear on. And then when they actually go to do the thing and they're told by CENTCOM that they're going to wear their front side plates and then have to carry this extra PPE, they're just kind of like thrown for a loop and like, man, how do I even like mount this stuff on my gear?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I've personally seen happen a lot.
Yeah. What is the I guess for the guy, I guess for most of the guys in the squad at this point, since everybody's could be expected to be an automatic rifleman. I mean, what is expected magazine count wise of basically all your lance corporals and below that don't have like special specific billets? Are we still looking at 14 mags, or are guys carrying more than that at this point?
So the way it's supposed to work is the automatic rifleman, which is one per team, is supposed to carry 22 magazines,
Jeez,
and then
Louise.
everyone else carries seven.
Hmm. I
And
carried
again,
14 mags with my M27. I couldn't imagine where I would put an additional 8 magazines.
Yeah, and the way that's supposed to work is they're supposed to have immediate access to two-thirds of those magazines, and
Mm-hmm.
the rest can be stowed like in an assault pack. Like per the Infantry TNR manual, NAVMEC 3500.44 Echo,
Mm-hmm.
the automatic rifleman, like his assault load, like he has to have his assault pack in order to like actually fulfill the gear requirements.
Yeah. I had 10 on plate carrier, 4 on belt. And I probably could have ran more on my belt, but being doing embassy work and everything, I was required to have my pistol at all times, which meant I was also required to have 2 pistol mags on my non-dominant side, which took up room for rifle magazines.
Yeah, I've got some crazy because we do a lot of stalking. We stalk in our plate carriers. So I have to balance carrying those 7 magazines with a pistol and 2 extra mag pouches with that, and then also have the ability to be loaded. It's definitely a my kid is very like purpose built right now, and it kind of throws me off sometimes.
At this point, I have refused to go any more than 2 mags deep on my front. Um, I will not put a third magazine on the front of me. It's so freaking awkward in the prone. I see some
Oh
guys
yeah.
that run 3 magazines, but after you put on like armor, you actually have level 4 plates on. Then you put 2 magazines on the front of that. I mean, there's guys that did it. There's always one guy that went, "Well, I did it." I'm like, well, I understand you did it, but it doesn't mean it was ideal.
Oh yeah. And I mean, you get those answers all the time with guys that were I early go out and they're like, "Hey, this worked here," and I'm like, "Well, this does not work for this particular scenario."
Yeah.
um,
Kind of transitioning the conversation, I want to talk about the civilian side a little bit, and just maybe some guidance you may have for the civilian riflemen that are out here listening and whatnot, because you guys started the channel with the civilian in mind to some extent. Is you know what is a big message you would push to the civilian listeners who are trying to embrace their inner American rifleman? Because while the Marine Corps very much pushes the ideology of every Marine's a rifleman, that's bullshit. And I've said it for over a decade because most people don't give a shit enough to actually learn their rifleman skills, let alone actually be competent with a rifle. But I feel like it's different on the civilian side. I feel like guys actually care. It's access to information and training that is sometimes the issue. So, what message would you push to all of them?
I would say, and a lot of people are familiar with the phrase "shoot, move, communicate." I would push as far as shoot, move, communicate, have the ability to medicate and the ability to locate, especially with the implementation of drones.
Mm-hmm.
So going as far as like develop like again, they're a pretty penny for like the DJI type of drones, but investing in some type of way to capture a certain level of imagery, whether that be through drone, might even be like a camera system. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen people do that. And also having the ability to self medicate to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Probably as far as being able to do limited blood transfusions. That's a good goal to work towards, especially for civilians. The shoot piece, obviously, when you're shooting, sure, flat range stuff is really good. I'd say probably if you do a lot of shooting, do a lot of it in the prone. A lot of your shooting should be in the prone or behind cover. And you should also maybe experience shooting with like a ruck on, like in the prone. It's not a very fun time, and it's kind of hard to get a proper sight picture, but that's where you're probably going to be.
Yeah.
Um, and then the ability to move civilians. I think if there's one thing the military does a little bit better on, it's probably the move piece because we always harp on physical fitness and it's like mandated everyone's going to PT.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then obviously the communicate piece, and that can go as far as how you want it with like communicating through HF, VHF, UHF systems.
Yeah. There, it's kind of changed a little bit, but there still is really a very limited amount of access to infantry esque style classes that civilians can attend. Um, One shepherd style classes, obviously, that's one of the bigger ones as far as like where you can go to get strict doctrinal infantry style skills. There's a few other companies now that do like a limited kind of small unit tactics style class. Blaine's a really good one. That's over there with Orion Training Group. Uh, he does that to some extent, but unless you're training with some local guys that happen to be lucky to have some vets that are experienced and have attended proper courses during their time in service, it's hard to find instructor access to this kind of stuff. I would say. I think that's the way to word it. Because even if you're not paying
Yeah,
somebody to, for a service, like guys are still instructing. I still instruct on a normal basis.
yeah, and that's kind of where me and my guys are trying to take what we do. And I mean, again, we try real hard to try and get as many videos and like information out there. But at the end of the day, we're trying to turn this into potentially like an instructor thing, or like for a very like low fee, basically to just cover like us like our time.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking to like train civilians on like just small unit tactics and like the very basics of stuff. And I think that would also definitely help foster like a better community around this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you can get a guy or two that's really motivated and has a very good base knowledge and stuff, you can really get things going productive. The big thing I always just tell civilian guys is be cautious of who your instructor may be, because just because XYZ guy markets himself as a veteran doesn't necessarily mean he knows what he's talking about.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's definitely, even in the high speed Instagram operator community of a bajillion veterans, there's a lot of things I see or guys that post shit and I'm like, that is not correct, or at least not as applicable as you think it is, all of the time. Um, or I just think like you are out of touch with like how things are now. That does not still work, or whatever it might be.
No, I 100% agree. There's a lot of bad information out there, and it's a shame because the information that I feel like people need is very, very simple and it's very, very easy access. I think what just throws a lot of people off is that it's just not sexy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like, a lot of what the infantry does is not conducting raids and blowing doors off and kicking doors in. It's a lot of sitting, establishing sectors of fire, coordinating fires, and just waiting for people to walk into your engagement area.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
that's the big thing. It's hard with civilians is, you know, um, they don't want to spend their weekends off if you're doing like some sort of like force on force exercise or like actually doing a FTX style event. They don't want to spend 8 hours sitting in an LPOP like just taking everything in. Like they want to do the cool stuff. They want the constant engagements. They want to do the ambushes. They want to kick in the doors, which is 100% fair. Like I understand it.
oh yeah. Oh
It's
no, I don't want to do it either, and it's my
yeah,
job.
yeah. So that definitely is a bit of a gap at times. Is painting the reality for those that don't know that the majority of it is sitting, setting things up, and waiting, not the sexy stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Um, I definitely think we've also seen probably since 2022, and again, that's probably a result of the war in Ukraine and whatnot. We've seen a lot more push towards civilians having proper support gear and having a um, deeper internal supply stage, outside of just guys having their helmet, 3 mag placard plate carrier, and their 2 favorite ARs. You actually see guys building out good day packs at this time and actually having good rucks, buying sleeping systems, hopefully buying rain gear. If you're not buying rain gear, buy some damn rain gear. You actually see guys kind of starting to build out a little bit more of like a infantry-esque style support other than just their fighting kit.
Yeah, and I think what I'd like to see more of as well is I hate to say it, but logistics truly does win wars. It would be really cool to see more guys like kind of practice like logistical resupplies, maybe on that level. Like, hey, how am I getting resupplied if we are securing this certain area? What do those resupplies look like? like how to cache, what is a cache, what types of things should you not cache. I'd like to even see it get to that level because that would be a definitely a great tool to have for like any type of prolonged conflict.
Yeah. It requires, I mean, a lot of this stuff requires people, which I think is the largest barrier to entry for a lot of this style of conversation. Is a lot of guys have a hard time getting a consistent 6 or 8 guys together, let alone more than a squad, and you start having some overflow to do like support style tasks.
Hmm.
I mean, even the art of just don't even think like cash and just like pure land survival, but like conventional resupply of, hey, this unit of guys is responsible for maintaining and distributing supplies or ammo or whatever the hell it is. Like that still requires people and a guy that understands the larger process of all of it to run that effort of things. And that's a big thing that I think civilian organizations lack and have a hard time recruiting is guys with experience doing support style tasks that weren't something other than just like your basic, supply guy. Like guys who held billets as a supply officer or as a logistics officer in the TOC. Like there's a very large lack of that specific stuff to come across.
Yeah, and I would probably say maybe the way like guys go about that is not like maybe if you're gonna have like a weekend you set aside to do like a field training exercise, you might take like a couple hours or maybe even make the whole exercise like, hey, this is how we're going to store these types of supplies. It's how we're going to organize them. This is what a chow resupply looks like. This is what a water resupply looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that also probably the biggest friction point with that is just like the standardization of chow. Like civilians, if they ever are doing this, they're probably not going to be rocking boxes of MREs. It's probably going to be like canned foods or something like that.
So
That is,
we, as our kind of internal thing, we do mountain house meals, and each of the
yep.
squads in our local organization is split up with something we call small unit deployment equipment. So each squad internally, it's stored with the squad leader at his private residence. They have a 27-gallon tote that has different expendable stuff like chem lights, water filters, um, medical supplies, stuff like that. That's issued to the squad, and then they also have X amount of Mountain House meal boxes that is used to initially do the internal resupply for the unit when guys go through whatever gear level they responded with their SOPs. They now have the squad issued equipment to resupply their own expendables.
Yeah. See that's awesome. And I don't know, man. That's good stuff to hear for things like that. I think from all different types of perspectives because again, like kind of go back to what I said before, like America is so blessed that we have like these two oceans between
Mm-hmm.
us
Oh yeah.
that separate us from these things. And I truly wish more civilians got on board with like this type of training. For whatever reason, like I don't know, maybe World War III kicks off, dudes get drafted, maybe some horrible like natural disaster happens, God forbid, but like definitely training like that and coordinating those things is extremely important.
It's coming around, and I think the Hurricane Helene thing kind of lit a fire under everybody's ass a little bit. The unpopular part is, unfortunately, people get really lazy during Republican presidencies. I don't know why that is. Everybody has their own opinion on politics, but the people who normally find themselves in these type of communities are normally some level of um, Republican, right-leaning, moderate, conservative style individual, and they go, "Oh, Republicans in office now. I don't have to train or find guys, or there's no threats now. Like I don't have anything to worry about. The Chinese are not going to all of a sudden one day turn off all our power because a Republican's president." Like that, for whatever reason, that is the mindset that people seem to have when we switch from blue to red.
Yeah, no, I've definitely noticed that. I think it's kind of interesting though because in the civilian sector, it's like I think dude's attention or guy's attention gets a little bit higher in terms of going to do something when there's a Republican president because I definitely feel like there's a connotation of if there's a Republican in office, we're more than likely going to be involved in some type of conflict. So that is interesting, though.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely different between military and civilian side. Military side, we do very much have a tendency during red presidents to get involved with shit. I mean, even during Trump's early administration, when I first joined the Marine Corps, there was the whole push into Syria and back into Western Iraq and everything, fighting ISIS and doing all that. It just didn't last very long.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah,
and then obviously, Bush with, G. Watt, Bush Senior on the first Gulf War, like, yeah, Republican presidents normally have that tendency, but in the civilians are motivated by domestic issues. Most of them could give a shit less what sandbox we're going to go fight in this presidency.
oh
That
yeah, of course.
that does not affect their desire to train or prepare or do anything. They care about, like, what is Antifa doing this month, or is the Islamic terror cell actually going to do something this year? Like, those are the things they care about.
Yeah, the Mexico thing has been something I'm watching a lot because that implies military interaction and civilian interaction at the same time.
I wanted to ask you about that earlier, when we were talking about just like force focus and all that kind of stuff, and we got way ahead of it, and I just forgot what has been that like with the whole troops to the border, because even there's Marines doing some level of stuff on the border at this point. So, like, yeah, what's going on there?
So yeah, they for a while on the East Coast, they were telling units to get ready to potentially deploy to the border just within like a day or two. There were actually a few units on notice almost immediately after Trump got elected. Since then, it's kind of gone down a little bit, but the West Coast Marine Corps sent, I believe, a whole engineer battalion down there in a like defense type role.
Yeah.
I don't think they actually carried their primary weapons at all, but yeah, no, that's definitely been dudes have been looking out for that. And then I think just recently the Mexican president came out and said that she denied Trump's push to have United States military in Mexico like fighting the cartel. There was some article I read about that, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, definitely something we've been keeping our eye on.
Yeah. I know the engineers are always big with that kind of stuff, and like the army was even before um, Trump. Like, if you look at like the Texas National Guard, their engineers
Yep.
have been like super busy constructing just different layers of barriers, fencing. What's I think's been super cool for the Texas engineers is they've actually been constructing like actual fobs just internally based off their own resources, machinery, all this kind of stuff. Really more so kind of like combat outposts, um, in a sense, more than like an actual full scale fob. But just the different levels of infrastructure that they've been building, I find is very cool. Um, I know most grunts hate engineers because engineers like to think that they're also grunts at times, but engineers is a super cool MOS, I think.
Oh no, it's cool. And I mean, some of them, like at the end of the day, are literally do the same thing. It's just engineers have such a broad uh spectrum of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have engineers attached to my unit right now that are in like go hand in hand with exactly what we do. So
Sure.
no,
Yeah,
I totally get that.
I think in the Marine Corps doctrine and MOS description for engineers, there is some sort of a snippet about being able to the um, supplement the role of the infantrymen during like certain types of operations. Like, they are supposed to be able to perform as basic riflemen when needed.
Oh yeah, and I mean the guy who's a prior assaultman, he probably he probably has a certain opinion about engineers because they basically when they got rid of assaultmen, called upon engineers to like fulfill that role
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent, which you can argue like they did a good job about that or a bad job about that, but yeah, that's what they've been asking of engineers lately.
Mm-hmm. So many different interesting billets and MOSs outside of just like infantry stuff. JTACs, combat engineers, like there's a ton of cool MOSs and just skills that support the whole bigger picture.
Yeah, I think one thing that I don't know, I liked to see it when obviously bad scenario, but when the Helene thing was happening and they were like JTACs actually controlling civilian aircraft landing in and out of I think it was a civilian privately owned airstrip.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty cool to see because, that's like something I would have never thought about prior JTACs, maybe even active JTACs controlling civilian air for like a natural disaster.
That was a huge thing with all of that was because to access a lot of those areas, you were really only doing it by helicopter, especially once like National Guard and like state law enforcement really did mobilize, like in that 5 to 6 days after the disaster kind of happened, and they were shutting down roadways into disaster areas. Like you were only getting in and out by aircraft, and there was just a lot of aviation logistics that went into that whole thing. Um, and really the civilian side and these impromptu organizations that stood up to respond to this, they carried so much of it. I mean, you can't understate what the government did do because as much shit as they get, the government did do some level of good, at least at some level. But the civilians, I think, hands down, carried the initial response efforts for all of that, which that's how it's supposed to be. If you look at
Oh
us
yeah.
historically as a nation, like that's where it's really cool for YouTube guys to just put Minuteman in the title of all of their YouTube videos now because it just adds more relevancy to everything, I guess. But that's like back in the day, like the Minutemen of your community who did, most people don't understand, actually did have training requirements and whatnot. Those were your first responders back in the day. It was just the normal everyday townspeople who responded to whatever the disaster was.
Yeah, no, totally. I really wish that I could have gotten involved with that. I was just at a training exercise for the most part, but a lot of my boys actually went there and helped out. So it was really good to see like either veterans or maybe even active duty military like using some of the skills they had in like a civilian role. That was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. Well, is there any other message to the people as far as the American Rifleman goes that you'd like to pass, or any encouraging words?
I mean, I think dudes should just stay lethal, stay prepared, read military publications, definitely get involved with those. That's like my biggest message to junior infantrymen is if they just stay reading, they can at least do as much preparing for themselves as they can at that point. So yeah, read as much as you can, train as much as you can, and I don't know. Yeah, that's really all I got.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. Pretty casual episode, but I think we definitely got onto a lot of good topics of conversation. A lot of people don't talk about kind of the your standard infantrymen as much. Like we said, they get tied up in the soft stuff a lot. So I definitely was glad we could dive into a grunt's life per se. That's not copyrighted.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. All right. I appreciate it, man.
All right, man. I appreciate you too. Keep doing good work, brother.
I do my damnedest. All right, everybody. That's all I've got for episode 41 for the infantry. As always, train hard, train often.
Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours. Tell me turn it down and I'ma